Welcome back to the Cowboy Church of Brenham podcast. We are glad that you're here with us. And if this is your first time tuning in and you want more of this, I was going to say amazing content. If you just want more of the Cowboy Church of Brenham podcast, you can find it on YouTube or on our website or through the Cowboy Church of Brenham app. So we'd love to see you there. Today, we are talking about what did we do when God feels silent, when it seems like he's not speaking to us. I think that's something that all of us have experienced.
Yeah, I think that can be a loaded question.
A loaded question? Why do you think that is?
Well, I feel like it depends on like the type of silence, I guess. But like, I mean, I know in the past I haven't handled it very well.
Yeah.
Like, I just be doing my own things.
So sometimes we might feel like God is silent, but it's just because we ain't listening.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Exactly. I mean, if y'all would have heard that hour before we got on this pod, like started recording, boy, y'all would like. It was some content. Let me tell you that.
We were just going.
Probably doesn't need to see the light today.
No, we were just wrapping circles around it, and we ended up here. We were, here we are.
Yeah. So that is something that we've all experienced, whether it's because we're not listening or because it seems like God's not talking. And that can be uncomfortable. It can be unsettling. Mm-hmm. If you guys, what's an experience that you guys have had where you feel like, man, I've been talking to God, I've been asking for things, and he just hasn't been giving me anything?
Why are you up in our business, Andrew?
I plead the fifth. No, I think like the first thing that came to mind was actually whenever I was trying to figure out like what I wanted to do with my life. Mm-hmm. Like what if I wanted to go back to school to go into nursing or not, because I was working in the medical field during then. And I was like, all right, Lord, like, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go with this? Where are you going to take me? And I think it was silent for a period of time, which it was unsettling because it's like, all right, no, like I do need to make a decision soon. But like hindsight, I can see how the Lord was like playing into that, because it wasn't necessarily that like I wasn't listening in that sense, but there was just things that he needed to like reveal to me through what I would like the job that I had.
Yeah.
So I guess you can consider it silence because I wasn't like actually hearing anything from him.
Yeah.
But there was things that were like he was putting the pieces together without me even realizing it then.
That brings up a good question that I have, I think, would be, is God ever truly silent?
I would say
well,
yes.
I would say yes, like in the sense when we pray. Like I think there's a silence that comes with that, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I could be wrong,
I think,
but
I'm telling on myself, but like there's been times in my life where I've perceived God as being silent, and he told me what I needed to hear, but I didn't want to hear it. So he's fair. Just kind of like being silent.
I've been there, girl.
Such that I finally listened to him.
Yeah.
Well, I think it brings up a good point of we've got to define our terms, right? When we talk about God being silent, what are we actually saying? You know, I think in your example, I think is what a lot of us feel like is there's a decision that needs to be made. Mm-hmm. And we're looking to God for wisdom, for discernment. On some level, hey, God, tell me what you want me to do, and we don't get any clarity. Right. And so I think sometimes when we talk about God as silent, that's what we're referring to is, hey, I need a decision to be made and God's not making the decision for me, or he's not telling me what he wants me to do. And so we feel that silence. I think sometimes the silence is, hey, God, I just don't really feel close to you right now.
Yeah.
And God, I want to feel like there's a relationship, like there's like some intimacy here. And sometimes the silence is, it just feels like distance.
Yeah. I mean, something good that I've always heard, part of it, I've kind of added some to it, but, silence doesn't always mean absence. Because also, the thing that I had heard, and I've kind of went back and forth with it, was that the teacher is always silent during the test. And when I first heard that, because there's a reason I'm kind of iffy on the statement, because the question is, okay, well, are you saying God is testing us? And that could be we could debate that all day back and forth.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah,
right.
But
right.
But the thought of it is like, okay, it is a very good illustration because you've been learning, you've been being taught all these things for so long, and then when you actually have to put them in use, you know what I mean? Doesn't mean that necessarily God isn't there anymore. It's that, hey, things are tough, and now you're having to make a decision, and you know, God's like, hey, at the end of the day, we've been through that. This is what, you know, we've been working through whatever. You just didn't realize this is what this was coming to. So I don't know. That's something that I've always thought about is like, hey, silence isn't always absence.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you know, go to the classroom setting, the teacher's still in the classroom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're there if an emergency was to arise, but you know, you've been being prepared for a moment, and a lot of times we just don't realize, like, oh, hey, the test is today. You know. So
Yeah, that's a good point. So we talk about silence as, you know, a lack of discernment on our part. We talk about silence as a distance between us and God. Do you feel like there's any other instances or any other ways that we can maybe experience that kind of silence when we talk about, you know, it feels like God's not talking to me? Where else do you see that, or how else do you see that happening in our lives? Is there any other? Are those
I think maybe even a good way to even word that is like, hey, why does God seem silent? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, hey, just in general, why do we think God seems silent? And I think we've kind of answered that a little bit, but like, if you're like listening today and you're you know, wanting it to be at that point, it's like, you know, what do y'all think are the reasons that God does, like, why does he seem that way?
Well, yeah, when you're talking about like when, you know, God is like trying to tell you something and then you're just like actively not listening and then you feel like he's silent. I think about that because it's like, in my perspective, I think sometimes God truly is, I guess you could say, silent in that, because it's like, all right, no, you're gonna end up figuring it out. Like, I've already given you the things that you need. Like, I've told you all the things, so you figure it out. You know,
it's
you
very
get
much
to
like
a point.
a parent that's
Yeah,
like,
well, it's like you get too
I done told
uncomfortable
you.
in that silence. Then it's like, okay, no, I got to go to work. And I got to do these things. I got to be obedient. And so that is like kind of what I was thinking.
yeah.
Piggybacking off of you, but
I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily right or wrong, but that makes me think of like the saying that like if you perceive God to be silent or God to be far from you, that God is not the one that moved. And I know that's a whole nother podcast too, but like I do think there is some truth to it of like, okay, am I making space for him to speak to me?
yeah.
I think we misinterpret like silence isn't always a punishment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's
No,
not.
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not silence is not always a bad thing.
One thing about God
No.
is everything has a purpose.
Well, and I'm not saying that's not where I was
No,
going with that.
no,
but
I know, but-
like out of all of those things, out of each different like types of silence that I've experienced has like ultimately been a lesson learned
Right.
from that. And so God's used it to teach me something. So yeah, I definitely don't think it's punishment, even though maybe I do think, I guess so, like I think that in a little.
Well, and I'm
bit.
sorry, I didn't mean that you were saying that. Like, I was just saying, like, maybe we interpret it that
Yeah.
way often.
Yeah.
Is that silence is a punishment?
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean for that to come across like you.
No,
know,
you're
like,
good.
I was just saying that I think often we do whenever we're in that season. Because let's just call it what it is. A lot of times this is a season of life. It's not normally a day or 2 days. It's like, hey, I feel like I haven't heard from God in, you know, a month or longer. And I think, don't get me wrong, there are contributing factors that we play into that, of like, hey, we haven't been in the Word, we haven't been doing those things. But I do think there also are those times where maybe it is, hey, we are in the Word, we are doing things, but yet we just don't hear God as not even as clearly. It's like we just feel like, okay, man, God is being silent on this, and I'm looking for an answer, and I just don't clearly. And I think that's probably where we perceive it. It's like, hey, the answer isn't just hitting us straight in the face.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Where's the billboard?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think about times in my life where I felt like God wasn't talking to me, usually, right, we have a problem with it whenever we're in distress. You know, I think of the story of Job, where he spends, 38 some odd chapters throwing his hands up at God.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey man, what's going on? Where are you at? And hey, you and I know from the story of Job, he was in a rough spot. He was really suffering. That's about as bad and low down rock bottom as you can get. And he's crying out to God. This is a guy who lived righteously, who throughout the book we're told that he didn't sin in the way that he talked to God and the way that he approached that situation. And yet, for 38 chapters, God doesn't speak. And so I think, like we can get uncomfortable, and it's in those moments when we're waiting for, so just, hey, God, I just want to know that you're still there.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes, I think you're right. Sometimes, hey, like Job didn't do anything. It's not like he messed up somehow, and that's why all this bad things happened to him, or that's why God didn't abandon him. But when God shows up at the end of that book, the thing that he has to say to Job is pretty much, hey, buddy, remember who you're talking to.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you and I, we get to step boldly before the throne of grace. We get to come before God as our Father and lay our hearts bare before him. But at the same time, remember this, he is God in heaven.
Right.
And like, he doesn't have to, he's not the genie in the bottle.
He doesn't owe us anything.
That's right.
Yeah.
He's not genie in the bottle, God in our shoebox, that whenever things are bad and uncomfortable, I need you to come fix this right now. That's not how it works. And I think sometimes we're guilty of that, of interpreting the silence as like, God, you're supposed to step in right now and fix my situation. And so we get really uncomfortable in that silence, partly because we've got an expectation of how God's supposed to deliver for us.
Yeah.
And that's not how he operates.
So,
Right.
so here's something cool that I think that maybe we can even break down a little bit if y'all, if we got this time, is if y'all want to go to Psalm 13. Psalm 13 would be a really cool way to look at it and break down. And I'll just read it, but starting in verse 1, it says, "How long, Lord, will you forget me or it says, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me?" Now, we can call that almost section 1 right there. You break into section 2, and then he says, "Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death, and my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall." All right, so section 2 essentially. And then we break into section 3, and then he says, but I will trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. So reading that, what are your thoughts when we talk about this idea? I mean, this is a Psalm of David, so obviously, David, one of the most talked about guys in the Bible, and all the things that happened. What do y'all, what do you see? What are your thoughts after kind of reading that?
I think one of the things about David that always strikes me is how honest he is with God about like his emotions. Like he does a really, really good job of bringing whatever he's feeling to God and being like, hey, I'm not having a great time. I don't feel your presence. I don't know where you're at. And then to see him come back around at the end and be like, but I still trust in you.
Yeah.
I think that's like a really good prescription for what to do.
Well, that's what I was going to say or like pose the question of like, okay, well then what do we do with the silence? And I think that's like an answer here is what you just said is like, no, we can still wrestle with the silence, but we can also still know that like he's going, like he is sovereign. He's going to like come to us in his timing, I guess. And so, but
that's the way you guys put that. I love that, is like the wrestling. And I think about Jesus on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? The perfect Son of Man crying out to his Father in a moment of great distress, and taking the sins of the world upon himself and being separated from his Father, and he feels that separation, and he cries out. And the way that David ends that psalm, that ultimately that is the place that you and I need to end up. Is, hey, do you believe that? Do you believe that the Lord really has been good to you?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's easy for us sometimes to get so focused on our immediate circumstance of like, God, you're not here for me right now.
Yeah.
And we base everything about what is God doing for me today. And we can lose sight of he's got a track record of being there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the reality is God's still there in that moment when you don't see him, where you don't sense him.
Yeah.
But, I love that David comes back to that after wrestling. And hey, it's encouraging to me because, hey, that means I'm allowed to wrestle.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I mean, you go back to that and you could even say this is like, hey, most of these times God's still working.
Absolutely.
And we just can't see, we just don't see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
God's
Absolutely.
doing something.
Yeah.
And I think that's for you listening today, maybe God is working something. He says he works all things to the good out of Romans 8, but God is working something. It just may not seem as evident as what we wish it would be right now. That it's so much bigger than maybe what we see, or maybe even it's not just something crazy big. It's something in the fine details,
Yeah.
and we want it. We want to see clearly at the moment. He's like, hey, it's just not. That's just not where we're at right now.
Yeah.
What's that worship song about? Like an on-time God,
Mm.
Yeah. To kind of go off of that, another verse, a Psalm of David is 62, specifically 5. I'll just read 5-8, but it says, "My soul, wait in silence for God only, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold. I shall not be shaken. On God, my salvation, my glory rests, the rock of my strength. My refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us." So it's like, to me, that right there is just saying like God welcomes the wrestle.
Yeah.
Like it's okay.
Yeah.
But he is like the refuge through it all.
Yeah.
So
So trusting in that.
So here's my question then. What do we do during this time? What do we do while we're wrestling, or while we're waiting, essentially,
Yeah.
for what we would say is when we're waiting to hear from God? What are some practical things maybe, but also some spiritual things? Like, let's start with practical. What are the practical things we do whenever we feel like, man, God is being silent?
Yeah.
I think one of the things you do is you keep looking to hear from him.
Right.
The best kind of ability is availability. And so like, I would say God primarily, how does he speak to us? He'd speak to us through his word, through his church, and through prayer. And so, hey, if you're feeling like you're in a season of life where God has been silent, make sure you're putting yourself in a position to hear from him. Like, are you engaged in the Christian community where people, brothers and sisters in Christ, can speak into your life? Are you reading from his word to see what he has to show you and how he wants you to apply it? Have you been praying to him, talking to him? I think practically it starts there of, hey, if you feel like you're not hearing from God, well, I've got to ask you, are you putting yourself in a position to hear from God?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would say is your spiritual disciplines, like making sure you're taking the steps to pray, to get in his word. And
Well, I just read something, and man, I never really thought about it this way, but it's like, don't let your feelings become your theology.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And
That's good.
and for
Ooh, that's
someone,
good.
well,
Man.
I just read it. I've never thought
That'll
about
preach, bro.
Well, but for those of you that are listening at home, Andrew, I was going to, but if you want to, let's simplify that. What does it mean to not let your feelings become your theology?
I think ultimately what that comes down to is hey, don't get so caught up in the moment. Sometimes the waiting is what God has for you. And when we let our feelings become our theology, what we're saying is, I'm going to believe about God based on what he's doing for me right now. If I feel good, God is good. Yeah. If I feel bad, God is bad. And that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
Because what Jesus tells us is, the more you look like me, the rougher time you're probably going to have. And so, we see throughout Scripture that God's people are called to wait on him. And I think ultimately, hey, that's the waiting is the best thing that you can do in those moments where it's silent. Because I think at least I have the tendency to, I get antsy, and I've got to make something happen, and every time that happens in the Bible where somebody gets antsy and they jump the gun and they try to make something happen, bad things happen.
Yeah.
Think about Abraham. God gave him a promise. one day
Mhm.
you're going to have a son. And 10 years go by, no son, and he's been waiting, and he gets antsy and he jumps the gun, and an entire religion is born out of it that's
Mhm.
been causing problems for God's chosen people for thousands of years now.
Ever since.
Right? And so like, hey, if Abraham would have waited,
Mhm.
and so I think that's the best thing that you can do. And when you let your feelings dictate your theology, when you say God is only good if I'm feeling good,
Mhm.
that's a problem.
So
really
let me
dangerous way to live.
let me ask this, Macy. What do you think whenever
Call out.
yeah what do you think are some of the common feelings or emotions that would start to, it could even be a practical
Like come
scenario.
up in the silence.
Yeah, like
waiting?
what would be some of those feelings that would start to cause this? What I just asked Andrew about. He kind of laid the foundation of that. So what would be some of the feelings that you would say start messing with our minds, start messing with our theology of that would start not turning us off path of the way we were going, but essentially it would be that would start
Like some
guiding.
red flags.
Yeah, so start guiding some of our decisions that
Well, I think-
maybe wouldn't have before.
I mean, immediately just thinking about the feelings that come up, I think of like there could be a sense of grief, there could be bitterness, there could be unforgiveness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of feelings that go into that. Like, and it's different for everybody depending on the season that you're in and stuff. But yeah, like if you let those feelings fester and if you listen to your feelings and let it define the truth of the season, like that's, like I said, a really, really dangerous way to live and go about your life. And those feelings can then like dictate what you believe about God too,
Right.
which is also really dangerous. And so,
Yeah, I imagine if you are dealing with bitterness because of the bad situation you're facing, and
Yeah.
you let that bitterness influence the way you believe about God, you
yeah,
starting to think about God as like a vindictive, petty
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Hey,
God is angry at me.
and
like, just-
there's lots of people who think that
yeah.
God is just an angry God
Or
who
God's unloving.
He doesn't
because,
love you. He
yeah,
doesn't care about you. And that's what happens when you let your feelings define your theology.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a really dangerous,
And
dangerous
and
place to live.
Andrew's gonna preach that.
That's a good sermon.
Oh,
Don't let your
yeah.
feelings dictate your theology. That's
All
a
right, so
good one.
so last thing, and Emily, you started to kind of talk on this a little bit earlier. So yeah, I mean, we're just rolling with it. But
What did I say? I don't remember.
we're getting there.
Okay,
Hey,
tell me.
So looking back, like over the course of, like we said, we all kind of have dealt with this, but you started to kind of mention like a time. Is there like a time of your life where you can vividly remember, man, I really was like God, like I felt like God was silent during that time, but then He was really working something big.
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
well, I mean, if you don't care, like, because like I said, you kind of started to hint towards something earlier, but and not even the same deal. But what would have been a time that maybe, and guys, I'm probably going to come to y'all too as well. Of
I was about to say,
What-
if I'm putting my business out there, y'all
no,
are.
I mean, it doesn't have to be anything crazy deep, but just
Air my
like,
dirty laundry.
what's
Mhm.
what was a time that you can remember of God, like you feeling like God was silent, but in reality He was just He was working in ways you didn't realize.
Yeah. Well, I think hearing Macy talk about her like career one, that's what I was thinking about was, when I got out of grad school, I had grand ambitions of what my life was going to look like and what my job was going to be and cute little boyfriend and everything to go with it. But that is not the way that panned out. And I remember being really frustrated with God because I kept feeling like I was hitting a brick wall and I didn't understand why, because I felt like He had brought me to this spot where I had gotten the education, I'd gotten the degree, I was ready for the next step, and I felt like He was in all of that. And then what now?
There was like an absence.
And
somehow.
that was really, really hard for me because I was
Mhm.
like, okay, God, you've brought me to this point and I know that You're faithful and I know that You'll see it through, but how?
Mhm.
And like in hindsight, I completely see like what he was doing and how he was at work and how he led me to be here now. Cause like, I'll be honest with y'all, I didn't plan to work for a church. I, in fact, said, I will never work for a church.
Well, thank God. God changed your mind on
So,
that.
and you know,
Thank God you said yes.
and that's one of those things that like hindsight is, you see him at work so faithfully, because that was not something that I ever would have chosen for myself. But because of how wise and caring he is and how he orchestrated the events that led me to profession, but also to Cody. Like, I would never have written that. I would never have signed up for that. But thank God that, you know, that's where we are now.
I can
Amen.
like, I mean, I touched on the career, but like I was in the same spot specifically with the career. I was like, when the Lord revealed counseling to me, I was like, absolutely not.
Are
no,
you sure,
there's
God?
no, you are funny because there's no way. But like, like being in it now, I'm like, okay, it makes sense. But also like the time of my life where I was single, which felt like a really, really long time, was like, all right, I feel like, Lord, you're giving me these lessons. You're teaching me all of these things.
How long, oh
like
Lord?
I feel like I'm like I feel like
been
I'm
there.
mature enough to this point, but you know, like it makes sense now. Like I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to be on my timing now, and so it's
No,
just
yeah.
it's funny how
Yeah.
it
For sure.
I think for
I don't
me, you know, I'm going to take this a little bit of a different direction. When I was in college, there was a period of my relationship with the Lord where I felt really distant and I felt like he wasn't speaking into my life. But that's because I was living in unrepentant sin. And, you know, I felt like, you know, God didn't love me. God didn't want me because I wasn't producing. And so I hated myself and hated my life. And I was just, you know, and that cycle just kept like repeating itself, you know, of like, I don't feel good. So I'm going to do something that feels good. And that makes me feel bad because I know it's wrong. And you just keep going down and down and down. And God was moving people around me that loved me and cared about me and spoke into my life and ultimately brought that secret sin to light. And that period of silence was a period where I was distant and I was running, and God supernaturally worked to bring me back to the light and to bring me, you know, he's always working, and in every situation and circumstance, whether we're waiting, whether we're running, God's always working to draw you closer to him. That's always been his heart.
Yeah.
And that was my experience in college was, you know, I was trying to run, and I didn't even think of it that way. You know, I thought I was just living for me, you know, and I'm just going to do what feels good. And, you know, God is able to work in our lives, and he was putting people around me, people like Hannah, people like some of my roommates, you know, and he was putting people around me that loved him and loved me and were willing to graciously speak truth into my life. And hey, at some point, you know, God gets a hold on you and he doesn't let you keep running anymore, you know, but that's what that period of silence looked like for me. Was I just wasn't listening,
Yeah.
you know,
That's good.
and so God was able to take me out of that situation so that, hey, you know, it kind of like grab you by the shoulders and say, hey, you're going to listen to me now.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
Sometimes
know,
you need that. though.
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And
Well-
so that was what it was like for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just gonna let y'all share, but I guess I'll share a little bit too, because I know y'all give me mess about it if I don't.
And I will. And I will.
But I do want to take a little different approach about it too, because I was sitting here thinking about it, and I had something originally different on my mind when we started this conversation. But you know, now sitting here thinking about it, I would say for me, when realizing that I thought God was silent was actually what I thought was one of the happiest times of my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So at the and
Interesting.
and let me explain what I mean by that is, at the time, like, it seemed like everything was going great. Like everything was kind of moving. It was good. I felt like I was praying and I felt like things were going, but I also was in, like, when I look back, because obviously that's kind of what this back, I was just doing whatever I wanted to do and God was letting me. So for me, like, I was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants, and I felt like, okay, well, everything's going fairly smooth, so I must be doing all right. But when I look back, it wasn't until all that kind of came to a halt and through some things, and that I realized, wow, that was not like for the world that was fun, but for me that wasn't. It was just it wasn't good at all.
Yeah.
And in reality, where I would say, yeah, I knew I was a believer, I knew I was saved, but I was missing all the good things that were I was missing like the joy. I was experiencing happiness, not joy. And it's when all that, like I said, I would say quote unquote crashing down. It was kind of the end of a season. Let me put that I realized, man, like where was God in all that? Like he was nowhere. Like he wasn't a part. He wasn't a part of that. I was just doing whatever I wanted to do and calling it God. And that's where I would, if you're sitting here listening today and everything's just going perfectly great, I'm not saying that it's not from God. Like God may be have you in a great season, but I would even question you, man, where is God in that situation? Where is God in that circumstance? Because I would sit there and look at that and say, man, sometimes God will just let us run and do whatever we want to. And then all of a sudden one day it comes to a crashing halt and you're like, all right, oh wow, like God never really was in the middle of this.
Yeah.
So I think that's for me is, it wasn't until all of that had ended that I realized, man, God really was silent and all that. And I just didn't realize, like, God was just letting me run. And that's why I would say, like, man, that's why I thought at the time, man, it was like a pretty cool season. I thought, okay, well, all these things are happening, but then you just look back, and that's where I would caution ourselves is when everything's just running, everything's going great, everything's that we don't leave God behind. In that scenario.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my thought on it. And, I don't know. I feel like this has been a cool episode, and I really hope that, I don't know about y'all, for me, it kind of brought some stuff back to light of like, hey, don't let God get put on the back burner. And, or even when God's not on the back burner, when we're searching for him, it doesn't mean he's not there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think there's it's a twofold scenario.
For sure.
So, anyway, well, I've enjoyed it. I think it's been fun. Y'all got any final remarks? Anything you want to say to kind of close us out?
I think so.
Good.
I think just like if you're in a season where you feel like God is being silent and you're seeking his will and all that stuff, like be encouraged.
Yeah.
You spoke about Job and how hard that was. And I mean, there's stories all throughout the Bible that, God is still at work. God still cares. God still loves you.
Yeah.
And he's going to work it for his purpose and his good.
That's right.
So,
yeah. Keep wrestling,
Period.
keep waiting, trust. And that was the best part about Psalm 13 is at the end of it, it comes back to that. Trust.
Right.
Trust that he's good. Trust that he loves you.
Yeah. At the end of the day, no matter what, David still admits, but I'll still trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even when I don't understand.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Hey, we love y'all. Y'all have a great week, and we'll catch up with you soon.
See you next time.
Yeah.
see you next
Come see us on Sundays. Love y'all.